As loyal theorists may remember, a few months ago I dipped my toe into the mobile gaming waters with a strategy game named Total Conquest. Since then, things have changed. Little did I expect that those cartoonish Roman soldiers were peddling me a gateway drug that would send me into the crack den known as the Google Play Store. Action, strategy, puzzle, adventure, arcade, you name it, and it's there. But why are people everywhere foregoing epic quests like Skyrim to crush some candy? Why is Mario moldering on the sidelines while I'm running temples, clashing clans, and conquering totally? Earlier I used the metaphor of a gateway drug, but it's true! These games are literally addictive, and the developers know it. They're programming them in a way that hacks your brain, taking advantage of psychological quirks that you probably aren't aware exist, and yet have huge consequences on how you behave and what you play. So it's high time that you learn the secrets mobile developers already know and are exploiting inside that head of yours. To understand that, we need the straight dope on the dopamine pathway. Dopamine is a specialized little molecule that's basically your body's happy hormone. If you happen to feel a sudden burst of happiness after beating a major boss, a wave of excitement when discovering a secret area, all that is basically caused by your brain being tickled by thousands of tiny molecules of dopamine. Scientifically speaking, dopamine is known as a neurotransmitter, which means it travels between neurons in your brain. When you finally beat that speeder bike level in Battletoads, your brain jumps up to celebrate your victory, and neurons get flooded with ions, creating a tiny electric current. When that electrical potential hits the end of your neuron, the ions pour in and the dopamine gets shot out into the gap between your brain cells like a zillion little angry birds. Except they're happy because it's dopamine, and as a result, you get a shot of happiness, excitement, or satisfaction. It's your brain giving you the equivalent of a big old pat on the back for being successful at life. So if dopamine makes us feel happy, why do we sometimes get bored with our favorite games? Well, one reason we lose that love and feeling about the games we play is desensitization. It's actually the dopamine signaling turning itself off. In any kind of addiction, whether it's drugs, alcohol, or my addiction of choice, Diet Coke, the addict ends up having more and more as time goes by. The first few times you perform the addictive behavior, like drink a Diet Coke, you feel awesome. Your brain still releases a bunch of dopamine the first few times you do that, but over time it starts to go, hey there, Matt Pat, aren't you drinking a lot of Diet Coke there, buddy? So with fewer dopamine receptors waiting to catch all your little dopamine molecules making that leap of faith across the synapse, the happiness signal gets weaker. Sure, eventually you'll get as much dopamine intake as before, but it takes a lot longer and you have to drink a lot more Diet Coke to do it. And the time after that, there are even fewer receptors, so the cycle gets worse and worse over time, until basically you have to be drinking Diet Coke around the clock in order to keep up the level of signaling you used to get from a couple of sips. Mobile games have the ability to regulate how much you consume, thus preventing you from getting desensitized. And they do this in multiple ways. First, they get you to fly through the introductory levels. Right off the bat, you're receiving rewards, achievements, unlockables. I was swimming in dopamine. This got me invested in the game early, but as it got harder in upper levels, those bursts became more sporadic and unexpected. But rather than feeling discouraging, it made me more excited because each victory felt earned, and the reward was even more satisfying. This is known as a variable ratio schedule of reinforcement, and is the same method that's used in a slot machine. You never know for sure when you're going to win, but when you do, it's incredible, and the designers make sure that you win just often enough to keep you coming back for more. Secondly, and more importantly, Dungeon Gems, Candy Crush, Total Conquest, and more all have mechanics built into the game that limit the length of any one play session. You play a few too many matches or lose a few too many lives and the game forces you to wait a few hours before jumping in again. This means they're cutting you off at times when you're most invested. In other words, you're always left wanting more. By not letting you play, the game actually becomes more rewarding when you're allowed to return. So you're taking games that are perfectly programmed to capitalize on some core psychological triggers and adding to that unbelievably sticky formula by also making them free to play, putting them on a console that exists in your pocket, making them super quick and easy to get into and learn, and gosh darn it, giving them an incredibly fun and rewarding sound and graphical design. There's a reason people can't resist these things. These games are programmed in ways that keep the dopamine flowing at max volume by spacing out your rewards, but they're not the only ones to blame. You are.
Barry. He's a professor in University of Berkeley in California, and in the late 70s he did a very interesting research, and it became pretty famous. But what he discovered is something called the escalation of commitment, and that is related to something else called post-decision dissonance, which is a phenomenon in psychology. And if I try to wrap up all that thing into a very simple slide for you, what he discovered is that when people make commitments of time and of money, but for our session today, the time is more interesting. When people make time commitment, there is something in their brain that actually justifies that decision for them, and then they're much more likely to make more time commitments. And that's how that loop is created, and they are escalating their time commitments.